Hi everyone, my name is Jacob, and today we're going to take a look at this game 3 from the match for the World Chess Championship between Gukesh and Ding Liren. So in the first two games, Ding Liren did manage to take a victory as black, and then they drew the second game when Gukesh had the black pieces. And so moving into game 3, Gukesh hoping to even the score, Ding trying to keep the momentum on his side and come away with a bit of a lead out of the opening. That would be ideal. This is a bit of a surprise situation, I think, to a lot of people. I think a lot of people definitely expected Gukesh to come out swinging and for Gukesh to definitely take the first win of the match anyway. I think Magnus Carlsen was the only person I heard say that it could go the other way, where Ding very well could take the first game. And if he did, or not the first game, but the first win of the match, and if he did, it would lead to a much more even match overall. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. That being said, I did want to take a look at this game just for my own benefit. I wanted to try and analyze the game before I took a look at any professional level analysis or like any other YouTube videos like that. But that's not strictly what we're going to have here in the video. I did do that this morning after I saw the game had finished. I took a look at it. I wasn't able to watch it live, but I did take a look at it and I tried to give it my best. And I think I worked out some of the ideas that was going on in the positions and why certain moves were made. But there's definitely a lot I didn't understand. And, I definitely still have a lot to learn. And I think we're all probably in that same boat whenever you look at competitors like this. I don't think that any of us who are here watching YouTube videos are probably quite on their level. So moving on from that, I did actually watch a couple different analysis videos just to get some of the ideas and pick up what I couldn't figure out on my own. I tried looking at it without an engine by myself, and then after I watched the videos, I checked out a couple other lines with an engine. And I'm just going to go over some of the key lines that I saw during this and just kind of talk about what the other analysis looked like in comparison to my own. And we're not going to go too in depth here, but I do just kind of want to look at a couple of key moves. So right off the bat, we're going to start here with the Queen's Gambit, and it does transpose to a Queen's Gambit decline exchange variation. And this is something right away. I don't play d4 in my games most of the time. I go e4, but I have thought about mixing up my openings more, and this is definitely something to be aware of is whenever these pieces just get traded off quickly in like the exchange variation like this, what's the benefit for each side? What are you looking at? In particular, this move right here, where you're capturing back with the e-pawn, which is pretty typical with the Queen's Gambit decline, I'm presuming. What you're doing is you're opening up this diagonal for your light square bishop. So just a big difference here. Like you can end up with a similar structure out of the French defense here, where if instead of having c4, you go Queen's Gambit decline, if you were to go e4, e5 as white, the dark square or the light square bishop is stuck at home for the majority of the game. And this is obviously a way to not let that happen. If you take back with the bishop or if you take back with the pawn, bishop gets opened up. Now, I probably wouldn't usually point this out so soon, but I think this game was a good example of what this light square bishop is really all about in these kinds of positions. Specifically, the light square bishop in this game is sort of the focus of the whole game, and we'll see that play out a little bit more. But I'm just going to make a couple more moves here. So knight c3, normal development. We get c6. I think this is with the idea, if ever bishop here, to pin, this is still defended by a pawn, and I'm sure there's tons of theory around why this is the main line, but this is the one Ding chose. This is what he was prepared for. And so then we get queen c2. And now this move I thought was interesting. I personally, when I was looking at it, I thought this, reminded me of what is this called? The Nimzo Indian. Like the Nimzo Indian, I know white players usually play queen c2 against bishop b4, so that if the capture is ever made, they can recapture with the queen and not double up their pawns. Two things in this position that were interesting about that, though, is that one, there is no c pawn that needs to be doubled because that's already been dealt with whenever white captured here. And also, what is the queen doing along this diagonal? Well, it's preventing the light square bishop from going to its favorite square. That's the whole idea. And now the next couple moves actually were interesting to me because it's what I think like I would do as black. I think it's what a lot of lower level players would come up with just immediately, which is just to say, okay, if you're going to put your queen out there, I'm just going to go ahead and attack it. And this causes white to have to move his queen twice. There's not really a good move you can make to tell this guy to piss off. You're going to have to move your queen again. And so he does, and he goes b3. And if I were playing this game, I would have probably considered this maneuver a mistake for myself. If I would have went queen c2 with this idea and got buggered off and then had to go queen b3, I'd be like, okay, so that's just not very good. But Gukesh has this clearly prepared. So one of the other things I do want to talk about as we're going through the analysis is the time spent on the moves. And at this point, Gukesh has spent less than a minute. Ding has already spent 12 minutes. These last few moves being the biggest time sinks. This one he spent 4 minutes on, and then that one he spent about 4 minutes on. But Gukesh played this in 8 seconds. So, like, he's familiar with this. This loss of tempo is no big deal for him. He knows what counterplay he's achieving. The benefit of going straight queen b3 earlier is very similar to what it's actually doing at this point. So if you go queen b3 immediately, you're saying, okay, well, if you go here, you're dropping the pawn. And this is not a poison pawn. You can take it. That's completely fine. And then if you're sort of saying the same thing in the actual variation that happened in the game, whenever you go queen c2, and then bishop f5, and then the queen goes queen b3, and then you're still hitting this pawn, and you still can take it if it's not defended. Now, of course, black's going to defend it. He's got plenty of time and all that. But it's the same idea. And so, like I said, in my own games, I may have looked at that as something as a mistake, but it's not. It's just preparation. And I don't think preparation is super important at a lower level. Obviously, you just find the moves and do your thing. But for me personally, I think my takeaway from this little sequence is just that it's okay, especially in these more positional games, to not maintain a one tempo advantage the entire time. Like, that's not that big of a deal as long as the position's solid and you're still getting good moves in and still getting benefits from the little sequences that happen. You're okay. And that sounds a little ambiguous, but what I mean by that is exactly what we're about to see here. So black initiates an offer for a queen exchange, and then white just counterattacks and says, yeah, go ahead, go for it. I just want to burden your light squared bishop. And this is clearly what Gukesh had prepared coming into the game, is this significant amount of counterplay against the light square bishop. But there's nothing really better here for black to do than to just go ahead and trade off the queens. And so in doing so, which, Ding does, what you've done as white is you have doubled your pawns, but you're inconveniencing this light square bishop and you're opening up this file for your rook. So black has to respond to the threat against the light square bishop, obviously. And I thought this move was very, very interesting. And it's essentially the focus point of the game. I don't know if Gukesh was prepared for it, and maybe that's why Ding played it. And he played it almost instantly, which is shocking. So it makes me think he had it prepared, or this just must have been the line he was looking at. But he does go bishop c2, bishop c2 with the idea of attacking the weak b3 pawn, which is doubled. And it is a little hard for white to try and protect this pawn. So if white were to get greedy and try and go something like knight d2, for instance, to try and protect the pawn, this wouldn't be working out very well for him, because now he's blocked in his dark square bishop. If you want to try and develop it this way, you have to make two different pawn moves. This is really going to hinder his development. And in the meantime, black can get fully developed, play towards the center, or he can even just start counterattacking on the queen side. That's a funny looking arrow. You can't quite go there as a knight. But yeah, so you have lots of better ideas here as black. This would actually be completely fine for black. You're chilling. Now, the reason I want to emphasize that this is completely fine for black is because what happens in the game is not completely fine for black in terms of this bishop. And we're going to see how this same idea, knight d2, is actually really impactful. And that's why, looking at this initially, if I were playing white and like in my own analysis, I was like, okay, yeah, I don't really care about the pawn. So I didn't even entertain knight d2 to begin with. I was like, I'm just going to get like accelerated development, put my bishop like here or here, and like we're chilling. And then I'm looking to play, e3 and going from there. Well, there is a different idea here, which long-term is to actually trap this bishop. And we're going to see the game play out in that fashion. So in the game, we did have bishop f4. You don't want to try and protect this pawn like we already discussed. But the thing is, black doesn't actually want to take this pawn either. So if black ever takes this pawn, like let's just say here right now, you do get knight d2, just like how we had discussed a second ago, only this time it's not blocking in the bishop because it's already developed. And now the bishop has nowhere to go. So he can come back here, but if he goes back home, or if he goes back to this c2 square, he can't get back home. These squares are all covered. So rook c1 would actually just win the bishop outright. Now, it looks like you have this, but you don't. You just immediately close that off, and then covered by pawn, covered by pawn, covered by the rook. So you're actually just going to lose the bishop if you try and save him. So with knight d2, you're saying, okay, I'm going to get this trade off the bishop for the knight. It's just a matter of where you want it to happen. So the only move you can really make is bishop c4. There's not a good way to defend the bishop and try and trade on this square. And as we just discussed, this isn't working. That's just dropping to either one of these pieces. So you just simply have to go bishop c4. And then, of course, you take. And now this pawn is nice and weak. You're going to attack it with this sample line that I didn't even... I mean, after I saw this, I would hate going into this variation as black. But I did watch one video that kind of showed how some tactics can arise out of this position. If black decided, okay, I'm going to play with these double pawns and be comfortable with it, white can attack, make this normal developing move, get his bishop, closed off from all this stuff happening over here. But he's in a prime position on this diagonal. And now the light square bishop is attacking the pawn. If black were to try and hold on to the pawn with this, there's actually a nice tactical sequence here that's just completely winning for white. So what you can do is you can just sack on the pawn, and then after the recapture, you go bishop g2, and that's hitting the rook in the corner, and there's no way to defend it. So that would be a good way to lose a rook, and so we don't want to go down that hole. Instead of going down that hole, after bishop f4, what we actually have in the game was h5. And now this was a move that, especially whenever I first saw it, I didn't even know what to make of it. I was like, okay, we're counterattacking on the king side, I guess. I have no idea. Obviously, well, so it's actually on the next move. Maybe we'll pay more attention to that. The first thing I saw with this move is that, okay, well, if black were to get a free tempo and he takes, you can't recapture because your rook's hanging. And I was like, all right, all well and good. And that makes white's move here very logical. You go rook g1. And so I'm like, okay, I get why you did that, but why not capture or why not push? Like, what's the deal with these moves? Just to ask yourself. Well, both of them are, I'll say, inconsistent with white's plans so far, right? So if you're to make a move like this, either any capture here is completely fine for black. You're completely fine. And the reason any of them's fine is because no matter what move you make, you're going to be helping the development of your pieces, and you're going to be hindering the development of white's. So just for instance, if you capture with the rook here, all right, well, now your rook's completely activated, and this guy's still, a little awkward. And if there's no sharp tactics here to be played. Like, if you do this, there's no way to immediately punish the bishop or anything, but it's just that your development is nice, it's clean, it's fine. Most importantly, you get this square back for your bishop, and you don't want to allow that to happen if you're white. So you don't want to take this way. And if you push, kind of the same story. You can just take here. This is even worse, because if you take here, well, now I get the square for my bishop anyway, and now I'm also kicking your knight. So I think it's pretty clear why that one's quite terrible. I mean, you're really just dropping a pawn. You could even take back with knight. Better take with pawn, but you could take back with knight. So instead of any of that nonsense, white just gets out of the threat with rook g1. And this makes it so that he can recapture with the pawn. And now he's still got control over that f5 square. He's saying, okay, light square bishop, you can't get out. Like, I'm going to stay trained on you. I'm going to win you. That's white's clear plan so far. With this move, in my own analysis, I wasn't too concerned. I mean, I thought this guy looked strange, but to be honest, I didn't see the long-term setup of trying to trap it. What I was looking at was the sort of pin and win of the knight here. And now it doesn't work out with the tempo, which is why I'm sure this wasn't what was going on in their heads. But if black slips up here, there's a very real chance that we could get in a move like here. Let's just do something, I mean, fairly illogical, but we'll just go for this. And then if we go for this, let's say he goes to defend it. Well, that's no good because of this, right? And now you do get knight h5, but this is definitely a little bit better for white. Like, if I'm black, I'm not loving that I got to make this move, and you're not down a bunch of material or anything like that, but it's just gonna be a little awkward. You're gonna have this fianchetto knight. What is it really doing? Yada yada. So this was the path that I was looking at. Once I saw that black had this series of moves, though, I was like, okay, but this isn't horrible. It's not good, but if he doesn't like his position otherwise, maybe this is something that he just has to go down into. Knight b to d7 is probably way better than going a6, but I just wanted to make a random move. So looking at the position from here, what Ding decides to do is he does go knight to b to d7, so the logical move, just continuing development. And after I saw analysis of the game, I was wondering, why didn't black, sensing the danger here, try and get his bishop free? And I think what it was on this very move, which this actually was a big think for Ding. This was a 30-minute think. You can see it right there on the left side by the eval bar. You can see the time sunk into each move. And so this was like a 30-minute sync. And what I think he was going for here was he's saying, okay, I'm going to lose this bishop. And now he's got still some chances to save it. But I think this is when he made the decision. I think he said, I'm going to lose the bishop, and I'm going to trade it for 2 pawns. And I've got this idea of counterplay where I can simplify to an endgame, and I'm going to try and win with my pawns versus the minor piece. And I don't think it's horrible. The computer really doesn't think it's horrible. I mean, this move the computer thinks is the best move, and it's because this one isn't actually the one that's getting rid of the bishop. But I do think that was his long-term plan. And that's just what I came up with on my own after looking at this. And I don't know if that's correct by any means. Maybe it was just a blunder later, but I think it's a very interesting concept to consider that he may have at this stage decided he was just going to throw away this bishop for 2 pawns and try and play the end game. So we'll have to see how that works out for him. But so here we get knight d2, and what this is doing is it's stopping the bishop from ever being able to capture. So earlier we were really looking at this as a reactive move, where if the bishop captures, it's just counterattacking it, and it's getting the win of the bishop as we looked at. But here it's saying, okay, you can't even move. So now the bishop doesn't have this square, it doesn't have this square, and it doesn't have that square, and obviously these two are gone. So the only square it does have is e4, which is why I was thinking, okay, well, can you go bishop e4 now? Or can you go knight e4 with the idea that if a trade happens, you just take back with the bishop? And so looking at these lines, it's a little sharp, but you can't really, you're losing a pawn if you go down this route. This runs into the same problem as before, where you just go f3, and then you're just kind of kicking the bishop away again. So you just kind of have to come straight back, and then after you come straight back, you're just getting hit with this. And it's like, okay, here you can counterattack, but it's no good. This is sharp, and it's not good for black. So you don't want to go down that route. What you can do is you can go knight e4. This does keep it a little bit. The idea being, of course, that if you do trade, you might be able to get the bishop back in the game from here. And, because if he trades with this knight, just for instance, then we could take here. And then if he goes for this idea, well, you come here, and then you're getting back out. So again, I'm not going to go into all these lines because it is pretty sharp because, okay, he could take with this one. And then if you recapture and he goes f3, what do you do now? Well, you're actually supposed to counterattack. Okay, well, then what if he takes? And so, there's all this sharp stuff. But the whole point of this pawn push is to actually get this square back. So you can mess around with all that if you want. If you want to dig into this, there's a lot of lines to look at. The point is, Ding didn't go for any of this. And I think, again, this is because he had already decided he was going to let white go for this backwards development. And instead, he was going to go for the win of 2 pawns, which I think is what he's setting up here. So this move, again, like we just kind of discussed in previous variation, just sort of offhandedly, but the big idea of this move is he wants to go g5. He wants to go g5 for 2 reasons. One, the threat of going g5 means his opponent might have to play g5, which gives him the f5 square back. That's good. Also, if he could get g5 out, well, depending on the way the game goes, if he threatens me, I threaten him, and then you could get your bishop back, and then you're not actually down a full bishop or anything like that. Game may stay even. The biggest point, however, is, as I mentioned in the previous variation, you are getting the g6 square back for your bishop. That's the most important thing. You're giving him an escape square. You may even go to h7, but that's the big idea, is you want to give him somewhere to run. So immediately, white does go for g5 himself, and this cuts him off. Now, this is not the top move, but it is a good one. So it's not the top move. It's not one of the top 3 moves even, but this does keep white's idea alive to trap the bishop, because now you're getting tempo on the knight, and, well, we'll just see in the game how white goes about it, but I think it's very good. So we get knight h5. And now we do this little song and dance with the bishop, where the bishop goes back, but it's on an unprotected square. So then the rook lines up to x-ray it through the knight. And then we have this beautiful move. I think this is the key move of the game. And this is the one that really brought home all the ideas for me, these next couple moves, which this is what made it apparent to me, these next couple moves, that the bishop was getting trapped and attacked. And that's been Gukesh's idea for a while now. He goes f3, which is very unassuming at first. I thought the idea with this was that after the knight moves, which it does in the game, that the bishop has a place to go, which is g3, which it does go to. And then the idea of f2 in my head initially was, okay, well, what if black were to say, let's just take a draw? And then the bishop goes back. And it's like, okay, well, I'll go back and attack your bishop. When we go back, and then boom, you're just running into a draw, right? Well, instead, whenever the knight comes forward, you can come this way now that you've made room with f2. On top of making room on f2 for the bishop, what you're also preparing is what gets played in the game. So we'll back it up a little bit here. So he goes here. He does go bishop g3. And then Ding doesn't go for this weird knight move where you're just attacking the bishop over and over, asking for a draw. Instead, he's going rook h5, which you can see. I meant to turn off the analysis. It's fine, though. This is a question mark from the computer. It doesn't like this. Ding's clear idea here is that he's attacking this pawn. That's the idea, but it just basically doesn't work tactically ever, and we're gonna see why. I'm gonna hide the analysis now so we don't have to look at that, but it doesn't work, and we're gonna see why in the game. Gukesh accurately assessed that it did not work, and he just goes ahead and plays e4. And now this is really nice. So these next series of moves, like I said, this is where it became apparent to me that the bishop was being trapped, and that was the idea. By playing e4, you're taking away any access the light square bishop has to this diagonal and beyond. So he had this square available after the g pawn got pushed, but he no longer does. He can't get there, for one, but even if he could, there's a pawn controlling it. So there's no way for him to go that way. We already discussed why he can't get out this way. He's trapped. The other light square bishop's covering here. It's just a matter of getting a piece to attack him. So black trades. I assume with the idea if he had the tempo, he could go here, and then after trade. I mean, you got to try and open up the squares for your bishop. It's just what you got to do. But note that he can't take on this, and there's no way to add another attacker on the next move so that he could attack on it at that point either, because it has 2 defenders and there's only 1 attacker. And in order to actually attack the piece, you're going to need 3. So even if on this next move, so white just recaptured, if you could add an attacker, just say like, if this wasn't a losing move, if you could go here and add an attacker to it, then after the bishop's hit, you could capture. But you can't do that. Again, mathematically it doesn't work out. And so that's just a quick counting game that you can just keep to yourself, and that I try to keep to myself for positions like this. So yeah, that's what was played in the game. We do get E takes E4, or F takes E4. And then we get this clever knight move. This is, well, we'll see the tactics line up, but this is a tactical shot to get the 2 pawns that I was talking about earlier whenever he made knight b to d7. I believe he had this move in mind as well. This is how he's going to get the 2 pawns back for the bishop, but the bishop is toast. So we go knight C, or rook c1, saying I'm going to capture your bishop. And so we can defend the bishop while simultaneously taking an unprotected pawn with knight takes d4. So now it's defended once, so you can't trade for it. But what you can do is attack the defender. Tactics piling up on each other. We've got bishop threatening to take on d4, and then if they're right now it's undefended, but so we have the bishop defended. So this threat is still here. You could take, and then take, except black is then staring at your rook. So you need to do something about this sequence. Okay, what do we do? Well, one thing you could do is move the rook, but Gukesh finds the best move, the cleverest, and that is to just mount the attackers on the knight. Because if the knight ever moves, you just take here immediately, and then it's dead. And if the knight were to say, take here, and then recapture, there is still no capture here because of the knight, and this guy can't take on e4 either because this knight's still around to recapture. So the bishop would still be trapped. So Ding, just cuts his losses, and he just says, okay, bishop's gone. What can I get? I already have 1 pawn. Let's grab another. And now there are some, you do have to pay particular attention to how you recapture here, is all I'll say. I'm not going to go through all the lines, but like if Ding were to try and go here, it's ever so slightly worse for him in the resulting position. The idea being that you don't take here, then you're going to give him the piece back. Or not the piece back, but you're going to let it escape, right? You would actually take here first because you have 2 attackers, so you're taking a free piece. And then there's nothing that's good here. I mean, you're just a piece down. You could just right now go ahead and move away. But if you wanted to simplify the position, you could take like this. And now you are down a minor piece, but this is the resulting position. You have your 2 pawns, you have these 2. But notice this bishop isn't very strong. It's not actually doing anything, especially if you compare it with the other variation you could go into, which is what Ding saw in the game, I do believe, which is that if you take like this, then after white recaptures, you can capture the knight. He recaptures the knight. You still have a bishop and a knight, and you're still down a minor piece, but this bishop is much, much stronger. It's a very good defensive piece. It's a very good offensive piece. It's targeting that pawn, attacking the center. It's a much better piece, preventing a pawn push, all that good stuff. So it's much better than the light square bishop was on b3. And that's kind of the difference in whether or not you want to capture with the knight or if you want to capture with the bishop. And like I said, there are other ways. I think maybe in like a more noob game, this might be the move to make, just to try and trick your opponent and see if he wants to go down this line, at which point you're actually up. Black is actually winning here because you're up so many pawns. So this would be better, but it's just a trick. All white has to do is not take the bishop that he's been so focused on, and instead just take the newly free knight. And then you're actually in a worse position. So if you want to play solidly and not underestimate your opponent, you're definitely taking back here with the knight. So we get the capture of the bishop on c2, and then the trade of the knights like we saw, and then the capture with the king. And now the capture with the king does set up some tactics here. So we see Ding try and capitalize on that, and he goes knight e5 here. Now this is something I actually didn't catch at first, but I did catch later on whenever I was looking at it with the computer analysis, not because of any particular lines. I think it was just seeing it again and actually brought it to fruition for me. But the idea here straight away is this is a very normal move. This is actually the move I decided I would have played instantly, but I didn't see any long-term ideas for it. I just want to make this move because it's centralizing. It's further development of my knight. I have the 2 pawns. I'm going to play this out. Might as well try and do something, right? But it does come with the direct threat of going knight f3 and forking the king and the rook. So white has to do something about that. And this next move is the one that actually kind of brought that to my attention. So white does defend against it, but I thought this looked a little awkward. I was like, okay, but after the knight moves, then this knight is hanging and the bishop is attacking it. Now it's easy to defend. Actually, it's not hanging. The dark square bishop's here, which we'll see be relevant in a second. I don't see this. Every time I look at this in the analysis, I don't know why. This guy's like not here, so it trips me up. But anyway, I thought this looked a little weird. It's easily kicked if we can prep these pawn pushes. To me, this looked like an overextension, but it's definitely not, and it's definitely necessary to guard the f3 square. It is the best move. So moving forward, black just completes his development. There's no reason to castle here. That's not going to do you any favors. White can just immediately start ganging up on these pawns since it's going to be harder for your pieces to defend him. Your king is as safe as in the center as it is anywhere else. Best not to move him unnecessarily. So we do get rook d8, sort of piling up the attackers on the knight. So now whenever the knight moves, there will be 2 attackers on it immediately. It can still be defended, but that's the idea. Also pinning it to the king. So if white's not careful, you could always get like c5 in, and then you'd be winning your piece back. So white, clearly attentive to all these ideas since he's in a totally winning position, just goes king e2. This gets out of the pin for one. It also gets out of the idea of the fork, guards the square with a different piece so the knight can move, and also the knight can now be defended again with like rook d2, for instance. So very good move, very obvious move to find. This is pretty simple ideas, but it's good to keep in mind how you should be looking at these games whenever the high level players are closing out the games. What kind of moves are they making? Okay, well, Gukesh isn't trying to overextend his advantage. He knows he's totally winning. He's just making calm, cool, and collected moves that just say you have nothing that you can do. Okay, so Ding, he goes rook h2, and this is setting up some tactics with, taking, removing the defender, and then capturing here. It's a whole thing. Gukesh just wants to get out of all that. He has lots of different moves he could play. This is the simplest, just to say, okay, now you can't remove my defender. All my pieces are defending each other, and there's nothing you can really do about any of this. How are you going to try and create counterplay? Ding plays a6. I don't know what this move's about. I mean, your position's just lost. Maybe he's just saying, okay, I'm going to go b5. My best guess on this was he was saying at some point I'm going to play c5, and I don't want your knight to be able to come to b5. But you can't play this straight away because the rook would just capture. I don't know if he ever plans on doing this, but then that gives up the pressure on the long diagonal. So I don't know. But that was my best guess. Is he's like, I want a different piece to take over b5 for whenever I go to kick your knight. White just plays the very simple b3. Another move I didn't fully understand. My best guess for this one, and I just had no idea whenever I was looking at myself, when I was looking at with the engine, that this is actually one of the top moves. I think it's a little bit just, there's nothing that black can do to crack open white's position, so he doesn't have to do anything, and the win will just come to him. Basically like a Zugzwang type, or Zugzwang type situation. The only thing I could come up with as to what b3 is actively doing is it is taking away this jump for the knight, which it didn't have yet anyway because the rook's here. But if you want to move the rook, then you don't want to give that square available to the knight. The pawn is also on a light square, so it can't be attacked by the bishop. Before it was being x-rayed by the bishop, so it's no longer got any problems there. It also frees up the rook from the defense of the pawn. So, I came up with a bunch of reasons as to why you'd make this move. If I'm white in this position, I'm probably looking to make a more like thrilling looking move like this or something. Well, that wouldn't work right away. But anyway, yeah, I'm looking at probably a piece move, but I didn't sit on this position for very long myself. At this point, white was completely winning. And so I was just like, okay, how does this wrap up? How does Ding try to create counterplay? He goes rook d7. I have nothing for this move. I have no idea what it does. I mean, it guards this pawn, which was previously undefended, and this pawn, but I have nothing past that. Rook c1, another move that is a little strange looking to me, but the idea is that there are tactics involved if you try to go rook d2 to hold on to this guy immediately. I don't actually remember exactly what they are, but if you want to pop it in an engine and try and take a look at it yourself, I will include a link to the game below in the description, and you can go to it from there, and you can play around with this, but I don't know anyone who actually does anything like that, so, credit to you if you are. But anyway, yeah, somewhat developing move, defends a defended piece or an undefended piece, and I guess it's just hoping for white to make a mistake. So rook c1, and then we get king e7, rook d1. This one makes a little bit more sense to me. You're looking to trade rooks off, because if you can trade material, then you are chilling here as white. You'll just slowly go into a winning endgame. That'd be good. Black just goes back. Again, I think he's just making moves out of momentum. He spent 5 minutes on it, though, so maybe not. Maybe there's something more here that I don't see. That's, I would say, likely, if anything else. But I haven't seen anybody else comment on this position either. Most people are just sort of breezing through the ending moves because the game's just over. But yeah, so at this point, he goes bishop here, which is kind of that move I pointed out earlier, but you couldn't make because the knight would have been undefended. Now it is defended with this rook maneuver that we've had. So we're just looking to trade off more pieces. This does force an exchange because you have to move the rook, otherwise you're going to go down the exchange. So then white just says, okay, well, we will exchange pieces here somehow. What's the best way to do this? Black takes here first, recapture with king. Why not recapture with rook? I don't know. Or bishop? I don't know. I assume it's just a setup like this kind of an attack, which you can't do right away. But anyway. So then we have bishop d4. This is, throwing a punch at this rook. But now we say, okay, get off of my file. He does get off of the file with a win of the pawn. But now we have this move that we were talking about a second ago. We are hitting the rook. And if you move the rook off this file, you're going to lose your bishop. So instead, he blocks. There's not a great spot for him to go here. For instance, if you were to go something like this, in case anybody didn't see it, you do get skewered. You will lose the exchange that way. You can't go here because the bishop is actually guarding that square, and you can't go here because the pawn is guarding that square. So it's very hard to stay on this file. It's impossible. And so the best try is just to go f5. Doesn't do much. Gukesh just increases the pressure, says, okay, I'll throw another punch at you. What are you going to do about that? And Ding, I guess there was something where he went to move his rook here and he hit the pawn. But regardless, he resigned the game. It's totally lost. I don't think anybody's making a big deal out of whatever happened at the end of the game there where he hit the pawn, but I just did hear something about it, which is maybe why he made the move and only then it says he lost instead of just resigning right after here. But it's totally gone. There's nothing you can really do. You're just waiting for white to beat you up and win the game. Instead of going here, he could have just went ahead and captured, I'm sure. Lots of things are winning here. So anyway, I want to look at this game right after it happened because I can't catch them live and I want to do my own analysis. I feel okay about it. I definitely didn't spot the big ideas and some of the tactics that were on the table there, which is crazy. These high level games, they always have tactics hidden in every position, and I just never see it till I basically have someone explain it to me. I'm like, damn. So I'm trying to get better about finding those. I'm also trying to get better about spotting when they're using their time, and trying to see why are we using that much time, which was my big hang up with this move 13. I was like, why did Ding use so much time there? And I think it's because he thought his best chance of winning the game was to go into that uneven end game. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's just how I foresaw it. Because it's a pretty predictable route the game went down if you let it as Ding. So, if you're never trying to bring your bishop back, quickly, if you're just saying, oh, we're going to go into this mismatch ending, I think it's pretty predictable. So those are a couple of things that I was paying particular attention to in the game. But a lot of these positional ideas just didn't come to me. I don't think I would have come up with this. And I'm sure this was prep for Gukesh, but even early on in the game, I don't think I would have come up with this h3 into g4. I would have felt like the queen move was a mistake, but it really feels like Gukesh was just making Ding, walk his walk, and there wasn't much that Ding could say about it. So pretty dominant game from Gukesh overall, I would say. Moving forward in the tournament, I do think this puts the momentum solidly in his favor. I definitely think the opening win was a little jarring for everybody that Ding grabbed, but I'm expecting what I think we all expected from this point onward, which is I think Gukesh is going to pretty cleanly take it, but could be totally wrong. Ding looked in rare form that first game, and then the second game was fine, but this one, he tried some very dynamic moves with bringing the bishop down here, and I think h5 was an interesting try to mix up the position. But from my perspective, it really looks like Gukesh just had his number. But nonetheless, I am going to watch the rest of the series, and maybe I'll be surprised, and I think it'll be interesting no matter what happens. So it's just good for chess. I think everybody's having a good time watching it as well, and definitely a lot we can all learn from these games. So I hope you guys enjoyed my petty little analysis of this thing, and I hope that if anybody is watching this, they get some ideas for how to do analysis themselves and kind of the things that I'm trying to look at as sort of like a club level player. and some of the ways that you can maybe look to improve your game. It's definitely working for me. My rating has gone up a lot these last few months, and this is just some of the stuff that I try to incorporate into it. And so I just thought I would put some of this stuff on YouTube and say it out loud rather than just talking to myself or stick it in my notebook. But that's all I've got for this game. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you want to see more like it, please subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one.